My dad came from a little farming town in Ohio. Didn't know anything about the East Coast, but he was a good football player. And he got, I won't say recruited, but a couple of Princetonians knew about him. He had a teacher in the school that he was at that had been to Princeton. And the first time he ever saw the campus was when he arrived as a freshman, a country boy, really. And Princeton just transformed his life. There's no question about it. And he played football here. He played on the team of 1933, the undefeated football team, and was an executive in New York. He ended up as the CEO of Yardley of London, a cosmetic firm in New York. And so I grew up outside of Princeton. I grew up in the township. And when I was a boy, I sold programs at all the Princeton football games. And because of my dad's involvement with Princeton, his roommates, his classmates on reunions would all come and spend time at our house and then come down to reunions. And so Princeton was really in my blood growing up. I did pretty well in high school. And one of the first grades I got here at Princeton was a paper that I worked very hard on. And when the grade came back and the paper was given to me, I thumbed through it. It was about a 10-page paper, and I thumbed through all the pages. There were no marks. And I thought, well, this is good. It reminds me of high school. This is great. I got to the last page, and the professor, we had a grading system then that went from 1 to 7, a little different than now. He had written 6. 7 is a total disaster. He had written 6, and the only thing on the paper was the word nonsense. And I thought, oh my God, I am in a totally different environment here. I also remember in my sophomore year going out to Forstall Research Center and on US 1 we had our wind tunnels out there, and we did our experiments out there. And we all knew who the engineering students were because we had our slide rules and they hung from our belts, and we were the geek guys, and everybody knew, there's one of those engineers. But we worked long, hard hours, and I remember being out at Forstall doing a project in one of the wind tunnels and staying late at night and then walking all the way back. I didn't have a car. We weren't allowed to have cars. I probably could have gotten a cab, but I didn't. It was in the spring, and I walked from the Forstall Research Center in the middle of the night back to Princeton. I can remember walking down, I guess it's Washington Road, back into Princeton, and thinking, this is really kind of cool. This is really interesting stuff that's doing, and I'm doing stuff here that I have the option and the opportunity to work in wind tunnels, and a lot of people aren't doing what I'm doing. You know, one of the downsides when I was here, I was here in the late 50s and into the early 60s. And in the country, there was a lot of unrest beginning in the whole civil rights arena, mostly focused on racial issues and not women and men in terms of their opportunities. But this was like living in a cocoon here. And we studied, we went to sporting events, we went to social events, we had our activities, but none of my friends really had a sense of what was going on in the outside world. I belonged to Tower Club. I ate my meals at Tower Club. The wait staff was black. All my classmates, I think maybe we had 1 or 2 African Americans in my class, but that was it. And we just didn't get it. I mean, we were living in a little cocoon. It never dawned on us that there was a whole upheaval beginning in the country, which frankly, in retrospect, I look back at this and I think, you know something, knowing what I know now and having experienced the liberal education that I got here, it's just too bad that I didn't have a broader awareness and put on some shoes and get on a bus and go down to Selma, Alabama, and go down to places where some of my young people of my age were making a difference down there.
Do you remember any specific professors who made an impression?
There are several, but for me the most significant was Sherman Hawkins. He was this young guy, and he had these big, huge glasses, like almost owl-eye glasses. And I remember going into a class, I think it was Poetry 206, and he started off by reading some poems. I had never heard poetry read before. Yes, I listened to some people attempting to read poetry. This guy, the emotion in Wordsworth and Keats and Shelley that he had, just everyone in the course leaned forward in their chairs, and I was just enamored of him. I also remember the time I began to understand what precepts were. I had there was a guy, he was a graduate student, I think, who was my preceptor in one of the politics classes I take. I don't even remember what it was. I just remember he had given us an assignment to read. And I read it, and he came in and he wanted feedback on it. And I had been very disturbed by the reading, and you know, it kind of bubbles up out of you. And I said, this is insane. I don't, and I didn't realize that he had set us up to have that precise reaction. Very few other people had it. I was either courageous or dumb enough to speak in precept. And he said, that'll be enough. That's A for the day, Burkhardt. Shut up. All right, now the rest of you, why didn't you? And I realized that, oh, I got it right. Hey, I can make it here. Kennedy was at the University of Michigan at 2 a.m. on an October night, and he said to this incredible crowd of kids who had waited for him in October of 1960, you guys really ought to do something for your country. How many of you would like to go and teach overseas and do this? And they went nuts. And so 2 days later, my brother and I, he's at Dartmouth, we're in the fall of our junior year, and we each pick up the New York Times about the same time. And we both reach for the phone, and our lines are busy. We finally reach each other and we say, this is what we're going to do after we get out of college. I went to Iran, he went to Tunisia. And the ask not idea, I was in the chorus that answered John F. Kennedy, and was proud to do so. It just seemed like that's what you should do. It was a natural extension at the time at Princeton. It led to me becoming a teacher. And when I got back, I taught in my hometown. Then I was invited to come back down to Lawrenceville to teach there. Then I went to Columbia to get the Teachers College to work on my master's degree and start my doctoral work. And then a friend of mine and I, we decided to go to San Francisco and start a free school, the free school movement. We were going to really change American education. But all of that was all about a dissatisfaction with the way education was delivered, and that there were much better ways to do it, and there should be opportunities for young people really to learn and become effective human beings. And so for the past 20 years, that's what I've been doing at a school in Colorado, the founding head of it. We work with adolescents for whom success has been elusive. We choreograph an environment and a curriculum around them so that 100% of the kids coming into the school are not going to graduate from high school if they stay where they are, for any reason you could think of, and usually it's this permutation of different reasons. I have kids at Berkeley, Wellesley, Morehouse, Spelman, San Francisco State, the University of Colorado, NYU, and their lives have, in the way that mine, when I went to Lawrenceville, this poor kid from a small town in upstate New York, and my world opened up. There are many parallels to what is going on in the lives of the kids I'm bringing. I mean, I had at least a nuclear family with parents who loved me and who wanted the best for me. Most of the kids that come to us, they're single parent, there's issues in the family, that kind of thing. But the resilience that they've had inside them, it's been flickering down to this just tiny little flame. And then if we show up at the right time in their lives, we help them rekindle it and make it want to do some pretty interesting things. So that's what I'm doing now.
Well, mine was probably unique because when I was 13, I was on a quiz show, the $64,000 question, and they asked me before they asked the questions on my topic, which was wild animals, where I wanted to go to college. And I said my father went to Williams and my mother wanted me to go to Harvard, but I wanted to come to Princeton. and the chairman of the board of trustees for Princeton happened to be watching, a very, very well-known physician by the name of Dr. St. John. And he invited my family and myself down to Princeton and remained one of our closest friends and my mentor, and of course wrote a very nice letter of recommendation.
Mine was simpler. My father was the class of 31, graduating right into the depths of the Depression, but still enjoying life, up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, which was a hotbed of Princetonians, people from Northeast Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, etc. Are here, but they have a very active alumni association.
What kind of sticks out as things that have changed at Princeton?
Girls.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there were only visitors before.
The coursework, we know about it, but we don't see it.
Well, it was harder when we were there, right?
Harder?
We had
Well,
5 courses. Now
yeah.
they only have 4.
Saturday classes.
Yeah, we had 7:30 German. I
Compulsory
remember.
chat.
Now they went away. Oh, they've got it easy. Young whippersnappers, they've got it easy. Well, as you say, medical. When I was an intern, we didn't get paid.
I got to think final exams are different with people carrying their power books around too.
Well, we didn't have
We didn't,
computers.
we didn't have calculators, slide rules, and yellow pads.
Well,
and,
I didn't use
and
the
the little
slide
the exam books.
They still have the honor system. They still have. I swear on my honor as a gentleman, I have neither seen nor well. See, it was as a gentleman. What do the ladies do? We had the honor system, and we had chapel rule. Remember?
Right.
We had chapel
I think
rule.
freshman year.
And freshman year, we had to know how to swim. You would like this. I was not a good swimmer. I just had to float for 15 minutes in Dillon
It's a great
Gymnasium.
requirement, frankly.
It was a requirement. We had to be able to swim before we graduated.
The all women out of the dorm by 9 p.m. on
Yeah.
Fridays, and I think
Yeah,
that was on
proctors
Friday.
were
and
there. They were
Saturday.
like large Secret Service. They come by with hats
But-
and dark suits.
They know, it was incredible.
And they were big. They were all bigger than us.
And they knew where the trouble spots were.
Yeah, near you.
You're right. And
Near those cars.
In junior year, when I mentioned to Dean Lippincott, after 2 months, I said, I want to move out of this 14-man suite where we had 3-man suites and things like that. He said, smart thing to do, Barry. He said, what room do you want? He knew in November who was leaving at Christmas time, and he gave me my choice of singles. I had a car senior year, and I got permission for my thesis to go up to Cornell to visit the library up there to do my thesis on Jean-Paul Sartre. And as I was the professor, my advisor was signing the application. He, listening to my spiel of BS on why I needed car permission, he said, I think seniors should have car permission if they use it wisely. What's her name?
Exactly.
And of course, and that became my wife, 6 months or a year later.
Well, reunions are special for me. I mean, there's 2 of us that sort of had this competition to be at every reunion, and so far we've made it. But it was a challenge when I was in Vietnam. The rule was you couldn't go back to the States, or they're afraid you wouldn't come back, return. But they worked on it, and they got a special exception that if you were within, I don't remember, if you'd only been there 9 months, you could go back and then return. And reunions came in my 10th month, and so I had to apply for a special exception, and it had to go all the way up to chain of commands. It had to go up the chain of command of the doctors, and he approved it, of course, being a doc. Then it had to go up to Westmoreland, and that SOB wouldn't approve it. But what they would approve is an R&R to Hawaii. So I got my R&R to Hawaii, got out of the airport in my Army uniform, went into the men's room, changed into my civvies, and went AWOL, got all the way back to reunions, and changed into our reunion outfit, which happened to be Army fatigues and an orange beret, and phoned in every day, pretending I was in Hawaii.
I went to a high school called the University of Toronto Schools, which was a prep school affiliated with the University of Toronto. Our high school, 10 years previously, had someone who had gone to Princeton, and his younger brother was in my class. And he came to me one day and he said, "Doug, I'm putting together a group to go to Princeton." And I said, "Oh, really?" And he said, "Yes, well, I will go down there and have a great time. It's a great place. And, you know, we'll play football and hockey and get a great education and so on." So I applied, and just by chance, I got in, and he did not get in. So at that point, I convinced my parents to drive me down here to take a look at the place. The professors weren't slacking off in the first year, even though some of the students might have been. And so they were pretty serious, and those midterm exams came along very quickly, very quickly. And I remember I was taking philosophy in the first term, and I got my exam paper back, and the professor wrote on it, "Plato did not say this, nor did anyone else either." So he gave me a failing grade on midterm, so I figured out I better start working. In my senior year, I ran for student government and became vice president of the senior class. It's funny, in the bio write-up, our class historian said, "What does the vice president do?" Of course, almost nothing, but the one thing that I did that was important to my life was that I was chosen as one of 2 Princeton representatives from the undergraduate council to go to the United Nations for a special meeting, and we did not know what the meeting was, but it turned out that there were 2 people from Harvard and 2 from Yale and 2 from MIT, I think, and 2 from Columbia. And we were sitting in the room, none of us knowing why we were there. And in walked Prime Minister Nehru of India, and he sat down with us for 3 hours and quizzed us as to what student leaders of America were thinking, and how he could make India better. You know, I really enjoyed Professor Lester's labor class, and Oscar Morgenstern was fabulous. He was the professor of business cycles, and I've been a business cycle theorist all my life because of him. For 34 years I've been counseling people on what to do with their money, and I owe it all to Princeton because I have used my Princeton economics every day of my life since I got out of here.
I think, like a lot of us, I was scared. I remember when my parents left me off in front of Witherspoon Hall, and they took off, and I suddenly realized, I'm in college. Ugh! Can I handle it? And I think a lot of us, we've talked about this at reunions, a lot of us felt that we were really scared and wondered if we could do the work. I don't think I really got over it until I got the diploma in my hand. I think, but I did get a little confident as time went by. It was a difficult time in a lot of ways, just getting used to being on my own and having to be responsible for getting myself up in the morning and getting to class. It was hard to get to my 7:40 French class 3 times a week. And in those days, they took attendance. There were only 3 cuts allowed. I was one of the people who joined what was then called Wilson Lodge, or Wilson Society. We moved into what is now Wilson College at the beginning of my senior year. And that was a brand new facility. And that was interesting because there was a sense of adventure. We were doing something new. The library there, for example, was the first a small library, not a specific departmental library, but a small library, and it was
run by students. I was the first student manager there. The Wilson group, it wasn't just outcasts, but they were more independent thinking people. It's had most of the campus lefties, and also a lot of evangelicals because they didn't like the club scene. So we had quite an interesting group, and we did unusual things like inviting professors to meetings. That had never been done yet. The club started doing that later. It's hard to believe that 50 years have gone by. Although when I walk around the campus, it's like, yeah, I was here. It was another life. And it's hard to reach back over everything that's happened in between to get a sense of what it was like. I think for some people, the college experience is a major part of their lives. Mine was important to me. It still is important, but I've had so many adventures, and I've been lucky in the adventures and things I've had to do that I don't think I would recognize myself.
Ours was, I think, the first or second class that had more kids from public high school than prep schools. And so I remember Shakespeare, freshman Shakespeare was by far the hardest course I'd ever had. We were reading 2 plays a week, plus 100 pages of criticism, plus writing papers. It was just overwhelming, you know. And yet, I wrote my first paper in there, and the professor called me in and said, "You know, you write well, you have good ideas, we should hear more from you." Oh, you know, it's amazing because these kids from prep school had read these plays before. I had never read maybe one Shakespeare play in my life, you know. It was all new to me. But so they didn't bother to do the work, and they thought they'd do it, and they were spouting off in class, and I was sort of in awe, you know. Then I found out it was the art of bull, you know. It took me a couple of months to find that out, basically. Right? So then I realized, hey, I can do this too. I studied hard and did reasonably well. The great lecturers, Eric Goldman's mentioned in the book there. And the guy mentions this one lecture that I remember too, on Coatesville, Pennsylvania. There was this famous lynching in like 1920s, you know, and he gave every little intimate detail of this lynching and the mob, what they did and everything. And still, so it's interesting that the guy who wrote about him in this book recalled that same lecture, you know. I used to go to hear different speakers. I remember Adam Clayton Powell, I don't know if you know him, famous black congressman from Harlem, and very outspoken. He was eventually convicted of some corruption, but he was very well known, and he came to speak. And I remember he started his speech, "Come wheel, come woe, my status is quo." And I was so impressed, I wrote him for a copy of his speech, you know. I remember also hearing Senator Carl Munt, who was a Republican from South Dakota, who was a ranking Republican on the Foreign Affairs Committee. And I was appalled. This guy didn't know beans about, I knew more about foreign affairs than he did, you know. And I was like, God, how could we have such ignorant people up there too, you know. So that was fun, you know, hearing speakers like that, and again, still remembering. By the way, I was also showing my wife where Fidel Castro stood, and I saw him here. A hero! Welcome! He had just defeated the Batista, the horrible dictator in Cuba, and we welcomed him with open arms. And I remember that, and I was so impressed. He was a huge man. I mean, just big, tall, you know, and his fatigues, of course, you know, but I was very impressed. I remember cheering him. We saw him on the corner of Washington and Nassau Street.
My father was a
member of the class of 32, and so there was always a strong Princeton influence in the family. He was class agent for years and years and years, writing little ditties to raise money and things, and so we were always very aware of Princeton, and it was a great fit. I had a great time in the engineering school. I, in fact, stayed on 4 years and earned a PhD in electrical engineering at the time. That's what computer science was called, but it really was a degree in computer science. And during the initial years at Princeton, I was a rower in high school, became a rower at Princeton, and that was pretty much my primary focus, along with the engineering curriculum. Professor Acton taught a night course in computer programming, and I think like my senior year I took that course, and I don't remember why I took it. But what happened was that Foreman Acton served on the committee that was responsible for figuring out what the final exam schedule would be. And the problem with final exam schedule is you have all these courses in the university, but if you have a student in 2 courses, those 2 courses can't have an exam in the same period, right? So the problem is to figure out, with all of those constraints among all the students, what the exam schedule was. And the story was that John Tukey used to come into this room where there were people responsible for this, when he'd lie down on the table on his back and sort of just dictate the schedule. And Foreman Acton had this idea that, well, maybe we could actually automate this process in some way. And so I worked independently for 2 years in graduate school, trying to put together the software to try to do this. And we didn't have the right mathematics in our hands in order to be able to do that at that time. It's an operations research problem, and it's fairly complex. And I understand how to do it now, but I didn't at the time, but it was a wonderful thing. I was a member of Campus Club, and there was a gentleman named Frank Carr who was in the McCarter Theater. I don't know what they called the McCarter Theater actors in those days, but it was that he was an actor in the McCarter Theater group or whatever it was. He came into Campus Club one day with one of those theater pistols that fired blanks. And I said, Frank, you know what? One of my father's favorite stunts was to roll down stairs in parties. And he's taught me how to do this. And I think, Frank, you and I really ought to stage a shooting in Campus Club. So the first event was in Campus Club. I wandered up to the 2nd floor and came around the corner of the stairs, and he hit the bottom of the pistol, and he went bang, and I rolled down the stairs and just lay there. And that was sort of the end of that one. But subsequent, I think it was it had to be sophomore, junior year campus. It couldn't have been house parties weekend because we would have been off campus for some rowing event. So it had to be whatever the fall big party weekend was. Probably the Yale-Harvard game or one of those weekends. They were partying at the club, and campus ran out of beer. And I was just sort of half kidding to one of my clubmates. I said, you know, what we ought to do is go over to Tower, which is next door, and stage a shooting. And while we stage that shooting, we can send some people over on the ground floor, which is actually the basement floor between Tower, and see if we can steal some kegs. So Frank and I went over there, and this time we did it a little better. We embellished it a little bit. I started at the 2nd floor on the Tower stairs, fell down those stairs, and he shot me at the top, and I rolled down. I got ketchup in my hand, got it all over my white shirt, and just lay there. I just lay there. And sure enough, people came storming in to see what had happened, and they, of course, emptied the basement. My clubmates went in, stole 2 cases of beer, and went back. And nothing came of it for about a week, and then I heard that the committee that oversaw all the clubs in those days had filed a complaint about, Tower had filed a complaint against Campus Club for that stunt.
I played 3 sports in high school, football, basketball, and baseball, and I felt if I could do it in high school, why not do it in college? And so that's what I did. I went out for football, I went out for basketball, I went out for baseball. And I played all 3 sports for basically 4 years. And basketball, I kind of dropped by the wayside as far as varsity is concerned. I played mostly junior varsity basketball, which was fine because as a freshman in Pine, I'd always wanted to play guitar. I played ukulele as a kid. And I wanted to play guitar. There was a guy in our entryway who owned a guitar named Whit Azoy. And Whit was playing guitar, and I went down the hallway, listened to him, and I said, God, I gotta do that. I gotta do that. And so he ends up selling me his guitar. I ended up as a sophomore in Dodd Hall, 1959. I'm telling you the band story, if you will. And 1959, and I'm jamming with another classmate on the guitars on the third floor. When two guys come walking up, knock on the door, and come into the room. And they introduced themselves. They were freshmen at the time. And I asked them, do you play guitar? And they said, we sure do. I said, well, go get them. Go get your stuff. And one was Dennis Page, and the other was Tom Brody, both from the class of '63. Well, they went and got their stuff. They came back and they started playing, and it blew me away. I said, my God, this is something else. Neither one sang or anything like that, but they played very well, accomplished musicians. And I said, we got to start something. You two, myself, we'll find a drummer, we'll find other people, and we'll get going. And we found a drummer as a senior in Cannon Club by the name of Kenny Myers, who was replaced after he graduated by a guy named Marty Edelman, class of '63. I was a singer most of my life, or a good part of my life. I sang in various functions and what have you. So I had a pretty good voice. None of the other band members ever sang, so that was fine. No problem. Wish they did in a way. But so we began to form this band and play at parties in rooms like this. After the football game, I would play as a sophomore in the game. I didn't play much as a sophomore, but I was on the team and what have you. And after that, come and play, for 4 hours up here in the dorm, or go to the clubs later on and play at the clubs. The streets were beginning to be more and more rock and roll, and they would hire bands. We were the first band on the Princeton campus to do rock and roll. The twist was going on in the early '60s, and we used to go into the Peppermint Lounge before it was even famous or even known, and watch the band, what have you. Well, then it became very well known. The twist craze was unbelievable. And it got so crowded, there were lines of people around the block. Well, we ended up playing at the Camelot nightclub, which is just around the block, and around the corner was the Camelot nightclub. And so we got a gig there, alternating with 3 other bands. We were the 4th band, and we played, from like 9 o'clock till 3 in the morning, and get up and do it again for 10 days straight, in between Christmas and New Year's. We originally started off as the Omegas. That was our lead guitarist idea. Eventually it all evolved. There was a guy named Ivory Joe Hunter, who was a piano player, black guy. And his Ivory moniker came from playing the keyboard. And he was kind of a bluesy player. I would say, my recollection is he's probably, I don't think he's alive anymore, but he would be like 80 years old, or maybe more, if we were alive. But I somehow got the moniker Ivory Jim Hunter. After Ivory Joe Hunter, there's no question about it. I don't remember giving myself that, but some of the band members say that it just evolved that I called myself Ivory Jim Hunter. So maybe that's what it was, I don't remember. Ivory Jim Hunter and the Headhunters is what we ended up being, and that's who we are today, is Ivory Jim Hunter and the Headhunters.
One of the signs I had made up for this year's parade is a sign that says, I saw the class of 1879, March, and the class of 2012. And that is the essence of reunions. There's the fact that the university has the seniors graduating this Monday, so they participate, draws them into this entire Princeton family in a most unbelievable way. There's no other college. My wife went to Cornell. I've been to Cornell reunions. They're very nice, but they're different, and they don't have the same togetherness as going well beyond your own class. It's a unique affair. I had a grandfather who was class of '09, a great uncle was class of, I think, 13, father in 34, uncle in 37, a brother in 60. I applied actually to Cornell for their engineering physics, nuclear engineering program, which is a 5-year program, which was my first choice. And I also applied to Princeton. My grandfather was not happy that I had applied to Cornell. I went to Exeter beforehand, and I think Exeter was the most competitive place at the time that I've ever been in. The quality of the students at Exeter and the sports and everything else was highly competitive, and of course at a much younger age. So when I came to Princeton, I didn't have problems of being away from home, or had been through that. I didn't have problems of insecurity, because I got long ago decided that it was more important to do what you think is right or what you like for yourself than to worry about whether the guy next door cares. I had a car my junior year only because I ran WPRB and got a special car for that, a pass for that. Otherwise, we didn't have cars. You know, on the weekend you imported women, and they stayed at the local boarding house, and it was a different world. And it was actually safer to if you brought a girl into your room past 9 to have her spend the night than leave at 9:15, which is crazy, but you know, that's the way it was. A lot of times on weekends, when you didn't have a date, I worked at WPRB by Bert Wunderlich, and I used to do a request show on Saturday nights. We played the first record, and we had requests from then on. It was great fun. The social life at Princeton I thoroughly enjoyed. And if there was women on campus, I'd probably been a lot more distracted.
Well, I took a course from Eric Rogers, a physics course that totally fascinated me. I always liked science. So, hey, physics, God, this is great. And I suddenly thought of myself as being the next great physicist, and I went into physics instead, dropped out of architecture, went into physics, and totally bombed out on advanced math. The advanced math took me down, and I didn't know what to do. I sort of staggered back to my feet. I was floundering, and I was not doing well. I talked to my folks. I said to my folks, I gotta take a break and get my head together. And my folks were 100% supportive. My dad got in his car and he drove down from Massachusetts, and he made an appointment with President Goheen. And he said, I think you ought to give this kid a year, a gap year sort of, we didn't know what the word was then, but a year off to go do something interesting. I went to Denmark, built boats. In the process, I loved boats. I loved working with my hands. I always loved that kind of stuff. I had a wonderful time, but I discovered something totally unexpected. I could learn languages. And I thought, I'd like to do something international. Came back to Princeton, they let me in. I was stuck with my history major. I couldn't switch that, but I decided to major in, do a thesis on China. And I wrote a thesis on China. Barely skinned my way through. Consistently misspelled Confucius throughout my entire thesis, but Maurice Johnson graduated me anyway. And I left with a thesis and a background in Asian history, and lo and behold, there was the Peace Corps. It was a terrific adventure, and I've been in that business ever since. Never quite grew out of the Peace Corps. I had a girlfriend here in Princeton, and we were down in this corridor going to my room, and I said, you know, this is just such an ugly wall. What can we do about it? And she said, well, we're going to paint a mural on it. And she painted this incredible mural on that wall. And really, it was really kind of fun. Well, within a day or two, the custodian in the building told me I was in deep trouble. I was in deep trouble. And the next thing I knew, I was going to be issued a bill for the repainting of the wall, a fine, bill, whatever it was going to be. You know, they were going to take it out of my hide for this job. I went to my friend Terry Schultz, who was in the classics department. We went over to Firestone Library. We went up to the rare books room where they have a printing press. And with his Latin, we created a little card which said something like Malcolmus E. Odelius Apologlusium Verissimo or something like that. And I went to the student union where I knew that Goheen occasionally went for a morning coffee. And he couldn't be found hanging out there reading the paper occasionally. And sure enough, within a certain period of time, I found Goheen was there having his coffee. And I came up and I just quietly put this card on the table in front of him. And he, being a classical scholar, picked it up, looked at it, raised an eyebrow, and he said, "All right, Mr. Odell, what is it you're apologizing for?" And I said, "Well, Dr. Goheen, I have to tell you that in a fit of something, something inside of me rebelled against this dismal blank wall of cinder blocks outside my room in Murray Dobb. And I painted a mural on it. I didn't tell him that Heidi Erdman and I painted the mural. I took full responsibility. I didn't want to blame Heidi because her father was a professor. I didn't want to get her in trouble. I said, I painted this mural there, and they want to, take my firstborn son and retribution. And I'm just terribly sorry about this. Okay. Anyway, end of story. Went off to class. Came back to the dorm. I come into the dorm, and the custodian is there. Oh, Matt. Oh my God, Matt. The big man himself was here. The big man was here. He came down here. He came to look at your mural. I said, what happened? He says, it stays. You're forgiven.